Thank you for coming to my AI Hack Talk. As I was introduced, we want to talk a little bit about introducing practical improvements when when the offering of solutions out there, as we can see today, is so wide, so overwhelming. But more importantly, the more difficult part is introducing change in-house. The people that you want to see become more efficient, the people you want them to benefit from, are usually the ones that are harder to change than technology. So, and I realize this is lunchtime, we might get a bit drowsy, some people are hungry. So instead of showing you a lot of product demos, I want to talk a little bit about our story of how we managed to introduce some change and improvements in a land where not changing is often the norm. And the country that I'm talking about is Japan. My name is Sean. I'm the CEO of Bootstrapped. We've been around for 5 years, so we're relatively young. It was a good marriage between legal and engineering that brought this family together, and we have teams around the world now and serving our many customers there. But I want to focus on Japan for a second. When we think about Japan, and I hope a lot of you have had the chance to travel there, you probably think of very beautiful images, right? Like beautiful aesthetics, things seems to be crafted so well together, often like really embedded in history. Even the slightest mistakes, the imperfections, seems to be there by design. And it indeed looks like this in the country. But this happened through centuries and centuries of optimization. And when we think about the modern workforce, the modern work systems of all the technology that has changed in the last few decades that are stacked on top of each other, and the various work processes that have been developed by great people, great seniors of the past to work in these systems, the modern image of Japan looks a little bit different and is a bit more chaotic like this, where layers and layers of old technology and a lot of process, a lot of meticulous steps are still kept, not replaced, but kept and layered on top of each other. And the reason for this is the Japanese quality that we all know about, which is no matter who's using the system, no matter who the operator is, you're going to get the same consistent high quality outcome. But for the person in the middle, it becomes overwhelming time after time. And in fact, this kind of overwhelming environment changes how our users become, even in their daily lives. And two examples that I want to show are, on the left is what buying a pen feels like in Japan. So if you're into scrapbooking or if you're a designer, that could be amazing. But if you just need to write something with a black pen, it could be quite overwhelming. On the second is what buying a train ticket feels like in Japan. They have the fastest trains, and I can get from one end of the country to the other within 4 hours. I don't even have to bring a bag with me. But that's the machine I need to operate. Multiple orifices, multiple screens, digital and analog. What do? Right? So it created an audience, the people that we deal with, our users, that have three characteristics that are a little bit different from the rest of that we see here in the West. They demand high selection, high precision, but they also expect themselves to go through over a high context in order to try something new. And this creates a lot of friction for adoption. This creates a lot of mental barriers, as well as a fear of not being perfect, because they don't want the tool to work for them. They're almost thinking they're working for the tool. So when it comes to selecting a legal product in that country, for our customers, a lot of them, they operate globally. They're either big firms that deal with international law, or they are global corporations that work with overseas suppliers or partners. They have both Western solutions and locally developed solutions to select from. It's a good thing, but that double amount of selection and all the anxiety of what is a good selection process that allows us to actually create a high predictability that after months of adopting the product, we actually see credible, measurable improvements in outcome. So we want to share two learnings, and for any product developers in the crowd, this freebie from us, we want to share two learnings that we learned that is useful as principles when we approach that market. The first one is always consider the dynamic between the veteran and the junior. I translated these two words directly from Japanese. I didn't want to use the senior person or the junior person. I said veteran and junior because the dynamic there is a lot more complex than we see here. The veteran may not be someone of a senior position, not be the reporting manager, but they are the ones that have spent all those years creating the complex processes, and they expect that the juniors, no matter what new technologies that they use, to be able to manually recreate those steps, step by step, to get the same expected outcome. They also they have a mentor to a mentee relationship with the juniors, and that creates a little bit of a power dynamic where their voice carries a lot more weight in the room. And so when we try to get customer feedback, it is not often easy to get a consistent feedback from everybody. Now, of course, they demand improvements in efficiency, and they want change. But at the same time, they also don't want to change, to say that how can we make ourselves not change and the new generation of workers that come into our companies still retain the heritage that we have while still improving. So we're left with this seemingly contradictory demand, and what we found that is using non-novel, more down-to-earth approach, often with the technology in the background, is useful to drive change with our customers and helping them adopt new things. To illustrate this with some of our features, this is an example of how we help reading information in a document. Instead of scrolling through in a document, finding where information are scattered, we want you to be able to click and point and get your information right away. We thought and we're inspired by the grammar check pattern, the underlining squiggly that you see in Word or WordPerfect, depending on which generation you come from. That's been around for 40 years. And so it was something that intuitively we could expand on and make it easy for our users to point and click at an underline and figure out and see information to definitions, cross-references in the document, as well as errors that we detect in the background. And within these little pop-up windows, we created micro workflows so that the users can get to the next step, whether that's making a tiny edit or that is making a correction either by point or bulk and move on the way. And this pattern has been something that was widely accepted between both the juniors and the veteran groups. And so when it came time for us to build AI into our system, we thought we should probably use the same principle, right? Probably use the same principle to reduce the barriers of friction of adoption. And one example here is how we approach translation. Most of our users have been learning English since high school, but as a second language, there's always a degree of, there's a nervousness there, right? And you're dealing with legal matters, and so I'm using a Japanese to an English example, but in reality it's the reverse. So we notice that our users love to be able to spot check certain areas. So we use the same way to convey the AI-assisted translations that absorbs all the context in the document to provide contextual-based translation to the users. And again, this had very, very little overhead to adopt for adoption and driving change. Similarly, we're not a big fan of putting the chat UI as a prerequisite for everything. I know it's hot, it's popular, I use it every day, but for a lot of our users, that might carry a little bit of a bias. And for things that are routine, like just understanding what are the recent track changes in a document and how to summarize that across the people who've made those changes, it's probably easier to use a tabular approach, and a tabular approach that you can also easily modify and export to whatever is the next process that you need. The second thing I want to talk about is usually with the leading provider, there are a lot of nuances of localization that is left out. And this is more particular in regions where it is not an English-speaking region or where the market is not so saturated with technology. And just a little bit of a history fact, Japanese has 3 writing systems. So imagine every single word can be written 3 different ways. And depending on the heritage of the company, depending on the industry they operate in, depending on their internal policies, they have different ways of writing different words in their own specific manners. And so by listening to our customers, we ended up building over 100 plus automation rules into our systems that help our customers go one click to conform a document to the format that they need. And we do this not only for the Japanese language in this particular sense, but in other markets like Korea, we also use it for formatting and numbering, where Microsoft, just until today, has not supported those things. And those are countless hours that stack up that does not add value to the people that work in those organizations. Lastly, I want to share that more looking inward at the digital platform, it's also important to look at the physical environment that the user is in. And what we noticed is that in Japan, a lot of people use very small notebooks, and they're usually under 13-inch screen size or lower. And so instead of defaulting to that side panel that we see so popular today, when you're dealt with such a busy environment, we want you to get the most of your real estate. And one of the examples here is how we employ our assistive chat, where with all the interactions that it could have with all the windows that you're using, it is also something that you can easily move around and scale to the needs of the environment that you're actually in. So we've been on this for 5 years, and we're very happy that a lot of our customers actually saw measurable outcomes in their efficiency, especially burning down over 30% of meaningless tasks that do every single day. And if you want to read more of this, please come to our website at bootstrap.com, where we have a lot of testimonials and case studies. And today we have over 700 customers in Japan alone, with a growing set in US, UK, Singapore, and Korea. So to make things short, I don't want to drop a lot of names. This is not the point. But if this story resonates with you, if creating change is hard because people are hard, or if you're like, this is totally nonsense, we're going to go and break things, we would love to come and hear your thoughts. So come join us at booth 190 and have a great rest of the conference. Thank you.